FPL Game Week 8 transfer targets. It's just a couple of days now until the Premier League and FPL is back. So in today's video, we're going to go through a whole host of players that you are asking me to discuss. We're going to go through the top players to buy, some potential players you might be considering selling into your team. We might be having a look at a little bit of injury news as well. We're going to cover that in today's video. Transfer targets, the aim is to have a look at all the players you are considering buying into your team going into FPL Game Week 8. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here as well. Game Week 8 transfer targets. Now, before we have a look at players to buy, I just want to cover off a little bit of injury news because it's been a while since we've done a proper FPL video. So there's a lot to cover after the international break. There are a few bits of injury news, two real big ones, and then we've got Konza in here as well. First one is going to be Bukayo Saka at Arsenal. He did limp off in England's first game. There was lots of controversy about whether it's just a Saka, limp that we've seen before and whether he'll just be fine, or whether the fact that he was subbed off after 51 minutes holding his hamstring meant that it was something slightly different. Now, Lee Carsley, the new sort of interim England manager at the moment, did come out before the game on Sunday and say Saka has returned home. He's gone back to Arsenal, but he would have been touch and go for that England game on Sunday. So he does expect him to be fine. So we are expecting Bukayo Saka to be back at Arsenal and should be available going into Game Week 8. The next one is Brennan Johnson, who picked up a slight knock in the first game for Wales. He was then excluded from the squad in their second game that has just taken place, but he was excluded not because of injury, but because of the amount of yellow cards that he's picked up. So if you're looking to buy Brennan Johnson, again, wait for the President's Conference on Friday, because he did get a slight knock in the first game, but we're expecting him to be absolutely fine. And then we've got Ezri Konsa of Aston Villa. He picked up a slight hamstring issue in the game against Manchester United in game week 7, didn't go on international duty. It does look unlikely that he's going to recover that quickly because it is a hamstring problem. However, it's not completely ruled out and he is expected to be back soon. If it isn't in game week 8, he should be back soon after. Having a look at a few players that should you be considering selling these players. Before we do this, this video is always being sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout. You can check out their members area where you get all the fixture ticker. I do player comparisons on their app or on their website. There's a link in the description which is still offering a discount as well. The first off is we're going to start with Trent, and Trent's going to be on this list a little bit just because the fixtures coming up are not quite as good. They've got Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton and Aston Villa in the next 4. And then it does continue into November after the next international break in game week 12 that there is quite a difficult run of fixtures. 7.1 million for him as a defender, but he has been returning really well. The only thing to say is he has been returning well as a clean sheet returns, not so much as an attacking return, with just 1 assist so far this season, no goals. So you could match him with someone like a Konate or someone like a Van Dijk. The other thing to note is, of course, there's going to be no Alisson for Liverpool. Now, I don't think Trent is a priority sell. I don't think he's even a sell at all, unless you potentially need the money to do something else. When you're comparing a Trent Alexander-Arnold to a Saka or to a Palmer, I probably prefer the midfielders at the moment in Saka or Palmer, and we'll talk about that in my team selection video tomorrow morning. So I don't think Trent is a sell. You do not need to sell him unless you might need the money for one of Haaland, Saka or Cole Palmer. Next up is Bruno Fernandes. Of course, Manchester United coming into a nice run of fixtures now. However, they have not been great over the past few weeks. They've not been great so far this season with just 8 points. I do think if you've held Bruno Fernandes this long though, with the fixtures that they've coming up, I can't believe I'm going to say this, I would hold on to him. The only player I would probably sell Bruno Fernandes for is Bryan Mbeumo, but even that is probably not a transfer I would do this week given that they play against each other and it's probably Mbeumo's hardest fixture that he's got over the next few weeks. So I wouldn't buy Bruno Fernandes at all, but if you've got him, I would hold on to him. Luis Diaz is next and he plays for Colombia, I think twice over the international break. He does play this evening after time recording. We are expecting him to start that game, but it's not confirmed at the moment. He's at 8 million, and with Trent, they do have a few difficult fixtures. We are going to see a little bit of rotation with the Champions League games that they've got coming up. I don't think he's a priority sell, but again, I think a Brennan Johnson, I think a Bryan Mbeumo are probably better options at slightly cheaper prices than Luis Diaz at the moment. And Diogo Jota even feels more nailed with the likes of Gakpo being a good alternative to Diaz, but then you don't get the same competition from Darwin versus Jota. Final one is Ollie Watkins. Again, the fixtures over the next 2 look absolutely good, and I would not go selling him for them. If I had to sell one between Trent and Watkins at the moment, I would sell Trent before I sell Watkins, although the alternatives to Watkins and some of the cheap forwards we'll look at do look quite nice. In game week 10, you might want to review what you do with Watkins. The fixture starts to look a little bit worse. at 9 million. We saw in game week 7, there was a little bit of Champions League fatigue setting in for them as well. So Trent for me is a hold unless you need the money. Fernandes is a hold. Luis Diaz is probably a sell, and Watkins is a hold unless you need the money. But even then, I'd wait until game week 10. Then we're going to look at Spurs. We've spoken a little bit about Brennan Johnson, and we are expecting him to be okay. And we're recording this video basically expecting that to be the case. Looking at their upcoming fixtures, they do have one of the best runs of games over the next 4 weeks. They do play the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. If you like to believe the 12:30 kickoff, it makes a player worse, then take that into account. But I'm not going to do so, right? Looking in their attack, we also don't have Son on this graphic. We will talk about Son when we look at some of the premium players. But at the moment, we're looking without him because we don't know he's going to be back, fit, and available. I also don't think Son is worth 9.8 when you have someone like a Brennan Johnson at 3 million cheaper, a Kulusevski, and a Maddison at 2 million cheaper, along with Dominic Solanke as well. I wouldn't recommend buying Son as a Spurs attacker anyway. Looking at their up front, I do like Dominic Solanke if you're looking at a forward. But my concern was the Brighton game. We saw Dominic Solanke dropping quite deep, where we saw the likes of Brennan Johnson and Timo Werner running in behind. That is a big concern because I don't think it brings the best out of Solanke, but I do think it is really good for the likes of Johnson and the likes of Werner or Son when he comes back into the team. Now, I don't fully expect that to continue. I do think Solanke's best position will return, and we will see him playing number 9 and right up front and in the penalty box as he should be, but it is a slight concern that puts me off. That does make me think that Brennan Johnson is the best Spurs asset to own at the moment. That's why he was in the wildcard draft I put together and Solanke wasn't. If you have a forward spot, I wouldn't put you off buying Solanke, but if I could own Solanke or Johnson, I'd probably own Johnson now at $1 million cheaper. If you can't go with Johnson or potentially he's injured, Maddison and Kulusevski are pretty equal. Maddison is worth the money over Kulusevski if you have the budget, but Johnson just fits all of the brackets. Now, looking defensively, Porro and Van de Ven, for me, there is no reason to be buying Pedro Porro while Spurs are playing Maddison and Kulusevski. Maddison takes all the set pieces, and with the 2-8s that they're playing in Maddison and Kulusevski, above Bentancur, Porro doesn't get into the same attacking position. So if you need a defender, it should be Van de Ven, and just don't worry about Pedro Porro at $1 million more. Now, we're not going to massively talk about defenders in this video, but I know some of you are asking. So just to go through my top 3 in sort of the cheap, mid-priced, and slightly more expensive options that we've got. If you need the budget picks, I do think Wout Faes is the best at 4.2. They also have a starting defender who is still 4 million. If you can't get up to Wout Faes, it is worth looking at. Greaves is next, just because I feel like he's slightly more nailed than Van der Berg. I'm not certain yet that Van der Berg is fully nailed for Brentford. If you feel that he is, even when Roslev and Rico Henry returns, then Van der Berg probably is the number 1 pick that we've got here. But just because of that slight uncertainty, he's down at number 3. When you look at slightly more expensive defenders, Rico Lewis is the next best in that sort of mid-cheap price budget that we've got there. Nice run of fixtures. Of course, got a slight rest in the last England game over the internationals, which is good. Ryan Aït-Nouri I really like for the long term. I don't think Wolves are that bad defensively, and they have some nice fixtures. But of course, if you need them this week, he does play Manchester City. And then number 3, there are lots of players that you could put in here. I've gone with Milenkovic as my Nottingham Forest option. Feel like he's actually more nailed over the likes of Aina and Alex Moreno. He got an assist. He's good going forward from set pieces as well. You could also have Van de Ven in here we spoke about when we spoke about Spurs, or you can have Leif Davies of Ipswich. Those 3 all tying really for that 3rd spot, but based off the short-term fixtures, I have gone with Milenkovic. Then in terms of the premium defenders, Gabriel is in number 1, despite a couple of fixtures coming up being a little bit more difficult. We have got Trent dropping down to number 2, just based off 7 million with the fixtures and no Alisson that they've got. And then this 3rd one, it could be Gvardiol, but the issue is I don't want to own Gvardiol when Rico Lewis is just a better option at a cheaper price. I've also said I don't want to own Pedro Porro because Van de Ven is a better option at a cheaper price. And actually, Konate's fixtures are not great, so I have gone with Diego Dallo. Now, I can hear you all laughing at the back, but actually their fixtures coming up are really nice. Dallo has good attacking threat. They have good bonus points, and they are top for clean sheets so far this season, which is a crazy statistic. So I don't actually mind Diego Dallo at 5.1 as a differential. Moving up and having a look at best premium midfielders. So here we've got Salah, Saka, Palmer, Foden and Son. There's no De Bruyne because we are not certain he's going to be back. And even when he is, before he got injured, the returns were not really there. First thing to have a look at is the underlying data. Expected goal involvements per 90 minutes he's on the pitch. Cole Palmer coming in top at 0.89, then Bukayo Saka, then Mo Salah. Then you've got Phil Foden, but his are slightly inflated based off the minutes he's played. and then you have Son down at the bottom. In terms of actual returns and points per 90, Palmer is also at the top, but then you do have Mo Salah above Bukayo Saka, Foden and Son down there. Of course, Foden not really getting any Premier League returns so far this season. So I think in terms of safest bets, Salah, Saka and Palmer are the three safest and best buys. Palmer, probably number one. Then we've got Saka and then Salah, based on the fact that you're not going to captain Salah over the next sort of 6 weeks. So as a result, he goes down because the value is not massively there at the moment. When captaincy comes into play for Salah, he does come back up. Now, the reason people are asking, and I wanted to cover this, is people are asking about Foden and Son. To start off with Son, I still don't think he's worth the money. I still don't think while they're playing with a centre-forward like Solanke, that Son is the one to go for. Now, if they play with Solanke dropping deep and Son and Johnson going in behind, then maybe we can consider him. But even in that situation, Brennan Johnson is just a much better buy than Son. You could look at someone like Phil Foden, though. Now, we don't know when De Bruyne is going to be back, and that will have an impact on Foden's minutes going forward, and it just doesn't feel fully safe enough. Those of you who've been following me for a while know that I'm quite a boring and a safe manager. Phil Foden falls outside of the category of players I'd be willing to buy at the moment, but if you like a bit of a gamble and you think his minutes are going to be good, let's say he starts all of the next 3, he'll probably score the most points out of anyone on this list. I'm just not certain that he does start all of the next 3 if De Bruyne is back, but even with Champions League, I'm not certain of that. So Son is a no-go for me. Palmer 1, Saka 2, Salah 3. But if you want a gamble, Foden is probably right up there as one of the best gambles and best differentials you will get all season if you think he starts all of the next 3. But right now, I'm not confident on that. Then starting to have a look at those cheap forwards. So we've gone with Cunha as the most expensive all the way down to Raul Jimenez. Now, Cunha is a difficult one because he does have a fixture against Manchester City this week. But from game week 10, a lot of us will be looking at Cunha as a potential buy into our teams with the fixtures they've got. He also has the best underlying data out of all of these so far this season, despite having a horrible run of fixtures with 0.5 XGI per 90 minutes. In terms of attacking returns, actually so far this season, Chris Wood is number 1. And over the next 3 weeks, I would probably put Chris Wood as the best until Cunha's fixtures start to turn. I think Cunha will be the best option once game week 10 comes around, but Chris Wood is next best for the short term at 6.2 million. Now, if you have a little bit of money, if you have Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he sits between the premiums, well, the Cunhas and the Woods and the Delaps and Jimenez's. If you have Calvert-Lewin, I would not be selling him. The fixtures are too good to be selling, but I still don't think I'd be buying. If I was buying new, I'd be buying Cunha, Wood, or probably one of the cheap ones over Calvert-Lewin, but I would not be selling Calvert-Lewin for anyone else on this list. Trying to compare between Delap and Jimenez is really difficult. I still would buy Delap at the moment over Jimenez, but I struggle to fully comprehend exactly why in my mind I think he's better. Jimenez plays for a better team. He's also on penalties. We expect both Jimenez and Delap to be on penalties. The fixtures look pretty equal, with Jimenez actually having maybe slightly better ones with home fixtures going into game week 11 as well. His underlying data is better, although some of that has been appearances off the bench. I just think I expect Delap and Ipswich to score slightly more goals than Jimenez. And there is always a chance that Muniz might come back in at some point, whereas I expect Delap to play pretty much every single game. So I think Wood is the best short term, Cunha is the best long term, and then Delap and Jimenez is really, really close. And you will also be looking at Danny Welbeck from about game week 10 onwards. Delap versus Jimenez is a real coin flip. Underlying data and maybe Fulham would be a better team than Ipswich, so maybe that should sway you in favour of Jimenez. And then finally, to have a few final players to discuss. The first one is going to be James Justin, who has 22 points in the past 2 game weeks and is probably one of the most requested players for me to talk about. And I have absolutely no idea why. I mean this in the most positive way, but I don't think James Justin is a buy at all. He got 2 goals against Arsenal with an absolute wonder strike. He got an assist in game week 7 where he passed it to Buonanotte, who ran on a big solo run and finished it and managed to keep a clean sheet in that game despite Bournemouth missing chances. They have a couple of good fixtures away at Southampton, at home to Forest, away at Ipswich, but I still don't massively expect clean sheets in there. I think the points for James Justin are gone, and I don't think he's a buy. Next up, we've got Kelleher. 4.4 million for him as the Liverpool goalkeeper looks great. The only thing is, we're expecting to have Alisson back by game week 12, which means the fixtures you're going to get Alisson for are Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton and Villa. It is not worth it. Even if you're wildcarding in game week 12 and you can sell him when Alisson gets back, I don't think it's worth it and I would go elsewhere. Rico Lewis we've spoken about a little bit and I do think he is still a buy. If you're looking for a defender in and around that 4.5 and you can get up to 4.7, I still think Rico Lewis will outscore all of the other cheaper defenders that we've got. And it is worth taking the punt that he gets benched every so often, because when he starts, I think he's better. And if he starts 2 of 3, I still think he's better than the other 4.5 defenders. And the final one, who is McNeil. He's one of the most bought and sold players this week because he hasn't returned in the past couple, but he has been really good this season and he has good fixtures coming up. I still think McNeil is a buy. I still like these fixtures. And if you own him, you absolutely should not be selling him. There is no midfielder that I look at the moment, unless you want to go up to Brennan Johnson. But even if that's the case, I would do it with another midfield spot. I would be holding McNeil, and he's probably even a buy with their upcoming fixtures that they've got and how involved he has been for them so far this season. So those are lots of players to buy. A lot of the players you suggested, again, I asked for players to discuss in this video on Twitter and on the YouTube community section. If you want to get involved and get your players discussed, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're followed on Twitter as well. All of the data, all of the fixture tickers, all of the players to buy and things, I look at the Fantasy Football Scout members area. So check them out if you are interested. They are still offering discounts as well using that link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about these players, other players that you're considering, your teams, all of it, FPL is almost back for 4 weeks, and then we have another international break. But we don't need to worry about that now. Any questions you have, drop it in the comment section down below. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.